I'm on a mission like a couple spies, and that, guys, is the reason why I catechize the good.
Welcome to the Reformed Standard. I'm Tony. Let's get started. Question 22 of the Westminster Larger Catechism reads, did all mankind fall in that first transgression? The answer is, the covenant being made with Adam as a public person, not only for himself, but for his posterity, all mankind descending from him by ordinary generation, sinned in him and fell with him in that first transgression. So now that we've gone through the first 21 questions here, and we've established the creation and then subsequent fall of man, which includes how he was created, what the origin was, the constitution of man, the covenant of works, all of that included here. We get into the beginning of hamartiology, or the doctrine of sin. And so here what we see is that the fall of not just Adam and not just Eve, but all of mankind is rooted in this initial covenant of works. So this is sometimes seen as parallel to or as an extension of Augustine's doctrine, which it's certainly related. Augustine argued that original sin was passed down sort of genetically from parent to child. Typically it's framed in terms of sort of the lust in the father during conception, sort of passed on to the child. But in Reformed theology, which I think is the sort of the correct descendant of Augustinianism, what we see here is that this transmission of original sin, or this transmission of, which we'll get to what original sin is in a subsequent question here, but this transmission of the guilt of sin in the fall of mankind is rooted not in biology, but in covenant unity. And so this covenant that God made with Adam in the covenant of works, or the covenant of life, was not made just with Adam. But because Adam was not a private person, that this covenant was made with him as a public person, this fall, or this violation of the covenant, sort of trickles down or filters out into all of the people who would descend from him by ordinary generation. And so this descent by ordinary generation is not accounting for this transmission of the guilt of sin, or the violation of the covenant, this fall, this corruption of the fall. It's not accounting for this by biology, but because those who have descended from him by ordinary generation are those who are under the covenant of works, because it was those who he made the covenant in behalf of. And so in this fall, it's not the case that Adam falls and incurs guilt, and then that guilt is necessarily or directly imputed to us. It is, but what the Catechism here is getting at is that there's a real concrete sense, because he was our representative, that when he sinned, we actually sinned. So it's not like we're bearing the guilt of Adam's sin, but because he represented us, his sin is our sin. And so in him we sinned, and so likewise in him we all fell. So it's important to note that the Reformed tradition at the outset is not arguing that we are condemned because we sin, or because we personally and in our own lives sin. But it's arguing that we are condemned as covenant breakers from birth, from conception, because we were actually, and in a not in the realist sense that we were somehow in Adam's loins, in a biological sense, but in a covenant sense, God was already comprehending us as united with Adam in the covenant of works. And so once he sins and violates that covenant of works, the consequences, the judgment that he incurs, is judgment that all of the people under the covenant of works incur, because Adam is our representative person. And so it's important to remember that as we move into some of the rest of the understanding of what this has done to mankind in terms of the corruption of sin, in terms of our propensity to sin, in terms of why we die, why do babies die, all of these things, how does salvation function, all of these things come to fruition from this seed that was planted in this question, that Adam's sin is not just a private sin on Adam's behalf, but is a public sin on behalf of all of the people who were comprehended as in Adam. And so we'll see as we come into the questions about Christ as our Redeemer, that the covenant of grace is a flip side of this, that just as we all in Adam sinned, we all in Christ become righteous. So those who are in Adam and remain in Adam, they fall under the condemnation of the covenant of works. And we'll see that this is vital to understand. So we should walk away from this question, not with some esoteric understanding of why it is that I can be punished for Adam's sin. Because I think sometimes the Reformed tradition, people who are sort of only cursorily acquainted with it, they're okay saying that we're punished because Adam sinned. But that's not quite right. Because what this says here is not that Adam sinned and so we bear his consequences, but instead it says that all mankind descending from him by ordinary generation sinned in him and fell with him in the first transgression.
Do you know, if you want, you could know this? The Catechism, hey, the Catechism, hey. Do you know what the chief and the man is? And how the Father, Son, and Spirit do manage? Do you know, if you want, you could know?
West Side.